Yellow and Red makes by Digit 27 in chapter 46. So what do we do with these guys? The five of them were crowded over the trees that the other members of the team couldn't were tied to. The Gozu and Nurari were still dazed and disoriented from what Naruto and Fu did to them, but Kigiri and Kikoi and Rinji were all looking at them fearfully. I don't know. We can't let them go. They'll just go running back to Orochimaru and tell him what we've done here. The captives shook their head furiously, unable to speak because of the lengths of cloth acting as gags. You're right, but we can't take them with us. They'll only weigh us down or try to escape. Again, the captives shook their heads desperately, all except Gozu anyway. Gurren looked thoughtfully down at the group with a hand under her chin, staring at Gozu in particular. She walked over and crouched down in front of him so that they were eye to eye. Gozu, you once told me that you would walk to the end of the earth for me. Is that still true? The large man nodded solemnly. Not the agreement of a desperate prisoner, but the sincere promise of a loyal follower. Gurren stood back up with a small smile, looking over at Naruto with a small nod. This will work. Gozu is loyal to me, not Orochimaru. He can carry them until we can get them to somewhere they can be locked away. Toyo narrowed her eyes at the scene. It's still not particularly liking all of this. Understandably, she still didn't trust Gurren, mostly because not even an hour ago she was trying to kill Naruto. Naruto just looked between her and Gozu, eyeing them both for any sign of deceit or treachery before nodding tiredly. Fine, it's probably our best option anyway. It's not like we're cold-hearted enough to just leave them here. Tia put a hand up to her chin with a contemplative expression. Well, now that Naruto looked over at her sternly. Tayuya, no. She huffed, putting her hands under her chest in annoyance. Sheesh, it was a joke, I swear. You got eaten by the Sanbai, and suddenly you have no sense of humor. Naruto smiled a little at the over-the-top display of annoyance before walking up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. She mock fight against it at first before smiling herself and melting back into his arms. A simultaneous call from Gurren and Fu snapped them out of their little world. Yes, well, I think we should probably get going. The base you wanted is in the land of hot water, so that means we'll have to charter a boat from one of the port towns to the north after we drop off these guys in Kirikakure. Naruto reluctantly separated from Tayuya, waving Gurren off with the hand. Don't worry about that. I got it covered. Tayuya raised her eyebrows at the declaration, but said nothing, content to try and capture Naruto's hand again to wrap her waist where she felt they belonged. At this point, Fu perked up, having been quiet alongside Yukimaru until now. What about the Sanbai? Are we just going to leave it? Again, Naruto just waved away her concerns with a hand, also trying to return to his comfortable position with Tayuya. Nah, QB says after me, and Gurren burst out of its gut. It's probably going to go and recuperate. Plus, Orochimaru doesn't have anything to capture it with now that Yukimaru's with us. He sent a small smile in the boy's direction, who returned it with a little grin. Fu just nodded hesitantly, uncomfortable with the idea of leaving a large angry turtle and a cove off of water country. Now, come on, I have to gather my strength before I can do another great breakthrough. So we might as well get a start on getting to Kiri. The group nodded and set off after him. After untying Gozu, who promptly picked up the still bound members of his old team. It was a ragtag group at best, but if you would be able to stand against them with Jinchuriki, a crystal user, and Tayuya. Two cloaked figures walked along the barren pathway, one seemingly a little more excited than the other. Despite their organization impressing the important society on its members, the two were more than noticeable. The first was relatively unremarkable, save for the bright orange spiraling mask that only had one hole at the center of the spiral. The second figure, on the other hand, would have turned heads even in the depths of Orochimaru's organization. Apart from the fact that he had enormous Venus flytrap sprout around his head, people would have noticed that his body was split into two colors down the middle, with a black and a white half. Come on, Mr. Setsu. I think we're almost there. Setsu sighed for umpteenth time that day. Generally, there was only so much he could put up with his fool of a partner before he started to look a little too tasty. Now remind me again, which tailed beast are we after again? Setsu sighed to himself in a more than literal sense, considering his slightly different personalities. The Sanbai. Toby nodded vigorously, and Setsu could have sworn he could see the man's tongue sticking out underneath the mask as he concentrated. He held up his hand with all his fingers splayed before counting off each one. HB, Nibi, and Toby, he giggled manically to himself from behind his mask as they continued to trek down the path. My, Mr. Setsu, you're being awfully quiet today. Are you pollinating or something? There was a moment of silence as the two figures paused on the road before Toby doubled over in laughter, tears streaming down from behind his mask. Both sides of Setsu grumbled in annoyance before walking on, content to simply ignore their Latin partner for now. Did Toby upset Mr. Setsu? Oh, look, that place sells dango. Toby can make it up for Mr. Setsu. Sure enough, Toby pointed down the stretch of road to where a small restaurant sat on the top of a hill with a sign advertising their dango. Setsu just shook his head as a negative. It wasn't like he even enjoyed the taste of a normal food anyway. Not enough raw meat for his liking. Toby wailed from under his mask, this time tears of sadness streaming out as they walked past the restaurant. Why, Mr. Setsu, so mean to Toby? I tried to be a good boy. And Setsu continued to grumble as the few patrons of the restaurant patrons of the restaurant turned their heads at the very odd sight passing by. When they had finally gone for enough that they weren't drawing a curiosity and slightly frightened looks, Setsu finally quieted down. Toby had adopted a saddened, hunched-over pose as he walked in an overdramatic display of how upset he was. Toby was looking forward to having a donko with Mr. Setsu. Then he was sure to get into the Akatsuki. Setsu really was nearing the end of his considerable tether. The idiot persona of his partner just too much troublesome. Obito must really play this fool of an idiot while we are alone. It drives me insane. There was another pause as both figures stopped on the road, looking at each other, one with irritation and the other unreadable due to the mask. Toby isn't a fool. Toby is a good boy. The black half of Setsu sighed again as they continued on down the road. Oh, leave him alone. I like it. He reminds me of Spiral. The black half would have sneered if he had a visible mouth to do so with. A little too much, if you ask me. The white half just shrugged as Toby continued to skip merrily down the path, swinging his arms in an exaggerated manner. Oh, this is going to be fun. When Toby captures the zombie, then he's sure to get into the Akatsuki for definite this time. Both Setsu's glanced at him before returning their attention to the job at hand. Captured the zombie without it having a jerky host wasn't exactly going to be an easy feat. Preferably, the organization would have sent somebody like Kisame or Deidara, considering their skills. But Kisame was still trying to track down the non-bi, and Deidara had dropped off the map along with Satsuri ever since they went to get the Ichibi. You have got to be kidding me. There's no way we can water walk that far. We'll all run out of chakra and drown. Gun was staring incredulously out at the open stretch of water that separated water country from the larger continent to the north and west. It must have been over 30 miles across at the thinnest gap, and now she just expected them to walk across. She wasn't a Kage for Kami's sake. No, you'll go as far as you can, then me and some clones will carry you. Taguya and Yukimaru, Fu can fly, and he looked instantly across at Gozu. Even if he did have the stamina to run across the large stretch of ocean, he didn't think he could carry somebody that heavy. Gurren just looked between them, chuckling to himself at Naruto's daunting expression. Oh, don't worry about Gozu. Out of all of us, I could actually expect him to be able to make it. I don't think I've ever seen him get tired. Naruto looked the man over again, taking in his rather simple features before shrugging. Well, okay, but if he starts to get behind, I'm definitely not carrying him. Kosu just nodded with his own small but determined smile as he looked out over the water, then at Gurren. Well, come on then, we might as well get going. The group all nodded before sprinting out over the water, so hoping they didn't get caught in a storm or something. Fu unfurled her wings, taking to the air as she simultaneously shocked both Gurren and Yukimato. The former stared up at her with raised brow, knowing that she was jerky, while the latter stared up with wonder as he looked at the sunlight stream through her semi-transparent wings. After about an hour of running, Gurren was starting to visibly tire and slow down, as was Tayuya. As soon as he saw this, Naruto immediately stopped and swung the redhead onto his back, picking up the pace as he tried to outrun Fu's flight. A few minutes later, he created two clones that repeated the process with Gurren and Yukimoto. Once again, Gurren didn't exactly look like she was enjoying being carried, but she found it a preferable option to drowning out here. As the hours dragged on and Naruto just continued to run, Gurren could only stare at the clone carrying her in amazement. She didn't believe having stamina like this was even natural or chakra levels this high even possible. To say she had underestimated Naruto would have been a definite understatement. Even Fu, a fellow jerky, had to come down from her flight every once in a while to rest on a clone's back, while Naruto was able to charge right on. Not only his stamina impressed her, but his chakra control. He was able to simultaneously walk, creating and maintaining clones. Even when the water became choppy further out to sea, he managed to maintain his balance and keep a startling pace. Gurren thought that she had seen the limits of his speed inside the Sanbai when they were escaping the mini Sobu, but now she realized she hadn't even scratched the surface of what Naruto Uzumaki was capable of. Suddenly, all those bravado as claims of defeating the Katsuki and Orochimaru didn't seem all that far-fetched. In all this time, Yukimoto had simply been staring at Fu, where she was in the air or rested on one of Naruto's clones' backs. He too had marveled at Naruto's abilities, but not so much as he had Fu's flight. She looked impossibly graceful as she rode air currents, sometimes not even having to flap her insect-like wings to stay airborne as she expertly rode the skies. She shimmered lightly in the sun and far from unappealing. Their thin glass-like appearance only intrigued the young boy even more. Even so often, every so often, Fu would feel like she was being watched intently, only to turn around while flying or resting to see nothing out of the ordinary. Occasionally, she would catch Yukimoto looking away from her as if he were purposely avoiding her gaze. With all the while his cheeks were tinged in a faint red. She thought nothing of it. She was far too busy enjoying the feel of wind rushing by her skin, displaying her unruly hair out behind her. Even so, she kept note of it in her mind to possibly ask her older brother about it later. It intrigued her slightly the way Yukimoto acted so differently from Naruto. The only real interaction with boys Fu had was with Bee Sensei and Naruto. Other than the only other boys she had met her age were the ones in Hoshigakure and Jojuro. The boys in the village hidden in the stars were all a little too aloof for her taste, even though that had improved slightly by the time she had left. Chojuro was exactly like Yukimoto, shy and timid, unless of course you put him in a battle situation. Then he was breathtaking to watch. It made her curious as to how boys could be so different. On one end of the spectrum, you had Naruto and Bee, the epitome of confidence, yet at the same time kind and humble. Then you had people like Chojuro, just as kind and sweet, but lacking confidence in themselves. Of course, there were also the bad ones out there, the cocky guys who were too full of themselves or just plain cruel. And for some reason, Fu couldn't figure out where Yukimoto seemed to fit in all of this. He seemed nice enough, but she didn't get the feeling he was naturally shy like Chojuro, only around her. Maybe Toyo would be a better person to ask, seeing as she had found her way into Naruto's heart. "Hey, I think I see land," she called out to the rest of the group from her position high above them, and caught the thumbs up from Naruto to acknowledge they had heard. He powered on, actually increasing his already speedy pace so that he could reach the land quicker. He hoped they arrived in the right place. He should have moved in a straight line, but sometimes with the waves he lost track. If they did go in the right direction, then they should end up at the southern coast of the land of hot water. After another 15 minutes, Naruto was finally able to set his feet on land again, allowing his stiff passengers to get off his back. Toyo, for one, just dropped to the ground, rolling around on the floor, glad to be back on solid ground where there was no threat of drowning. Gurren and Yukimaro seemed just as pleased, but were slightly less visible with their celebration. Dato smiled at the warm scene before taking one step further inland and promptly fainting on the spot. Toyo looked down at his crumbled form before stiffing a laugh. Wow, looks like we found Naruto's limit. I thought I'd never see the day. Gurren just nodded dumbly as she had been unsure of Naruto's ability right up until the end, and it seemed that even 5 more minutes and they would have all been plunged into the freezing waters of the ocean. He's truly remarkable, I have to admit. Tayo raised an eyebrow in her direction as she hefted Naruto up under her arm. Don't be getting any ideas, Twinkles. He's mine. I found him first. Gurren just laughed faintly and raised the placating hand as the odd group moved further into the country, and she joked, but a part of her was actually a little sorry that Naruto was taken. He was a remarkable person, and Gurren didn't hand out compliments like that to anybody. Mr. Setsu! Setsu watched impassively as Toby continued to make a fool out of himself as he was tossed around the large cove by the highly angered Zanpai. The half-planted man didn't understand why the man wouldn't simply use his abilities and did this already instead of acting the idiot and prolonged this. The black half finally grew too impatient, and he had other assignments besides babysitting a fool that wouldn't act his own age or ability. The former grassland plunged his hands into the ground at the edge of the coast, spreading out his chakra as a massive system of large roots burst upwards from his position. With more chakra, he forced them across the lake until they formed a net that Toby and then the Zanbai promptly found themselves caught in. A few minutes later, and Setsu had simultaneously subdued the massive turtle. His wood-style ninjutsu drained away the most potent of the demonic chakra. A soaked Toby climbed out of the water onto the creature's upturned belly, looking around at himself in wonder. Did you see that, Mr. Setsu? My jutsu totally got him. Now, I'm sure to get into the Katsuki. Black Setsu used the arm he controlled and firmly planted his face into it, really not wanting to deal with Toby's antics right now. He turned and started walking away from the coast, leaving a confused and slightly panicked Toby behind as he frantically waved his arms above his head. Mr. Setsu, what about the Zanbai? We still have to get it back to the base. Setsu didn't reply as he just continued to walk into the forest, leaving Toby to look around himself and scratch his head. Suddenly, the beast beneath him roared out from under the water, nearly sending the masked figure toppling back into the ocean. Toby frantically shook his hands down at the creature's belly. Good Zanbai. Setsu could only smirk as the panicked cry rang through the forest. Mr. Setsu! Fu smiled as she looked down at Naruto's peaceful, resting form. Like everybody else, she didn't believe that Naruto even had a limit. Then again, over 30 miles of water running was impressive. She stretched out her arms a bit, still a little sore from hours of flight, and sitting on Naruto's back. She smirked as she looked down at the line next to her boyfriend, not asleep, but using him as a pillow until he resigned his strength and woke up. A part of Fu wished that she could have somebody like that. She knew her brother loved her, but it could never be in that way. Well, she would never call her life shelter, especially before Naruto had found her, and she would never call him overbearing. She knew that Naruto was very protective of her. She wasn't resentful, and knew it was out of concern, but it didn't have the side effect of keeping her from many things. Boys her age, for example, they always moved around too much for her to develop any meaningful relationships. She hoped that would all change when they got back to Suna, but now here they were, out on the road again. She was shocked out of her thoughts when she spotted Yukimoto over by a tree, staring into the crystallized flowers of his. She looked behind her at Gurren gently comfortably against the tree and wondering why Yukimaru was so obsessed with Crystal. At first, she thought it was because it was his only connection to Gurren when she wasn't there, but she was right across the clearing from him. Everything about the boy was a mystery to her. His shy but warm personality, his past, his strange ability that made her feel an unrivaled calm. She walked over, completely unnoticed, as the boy was observed in the reflection in his crystal. Fu wondered if there was any significance in the camellia, but from the way Yukimaru couldn't tear his eyes away from it, she knew there had to be. Hi. The boy's head darted up, shocked at getting sneaked up on, despite Fu making no attempt to do so. Hi. Fu smiled and sat down next to him, leaning against the same tree as she studied the crystal. And so, what's with you in that crystal? I know Gurren gave it to you, but there must be a story behind it. Yukimaru gulped and stared at the frozen flower before his gaze started to Gurren, and finally back to Fu. Like camellias, red or white. Instead of petals, the entire flower drops from the tree, and you can make ink from the tree itself. Fu nodded along. It was actually quite interesting, despite her knowing practically nothing about flowers. Yukimaru's eyes suddenly brightened as she looked around, settling on something further away from the camper. I can show you something if that's okay. Fu just nodded, now intrigued by what the boy was offering. They picked themselves up, and Yukimaru led her away from the clearing, with his eyes darting around as if he was looking for something. Finally, he smiled warmly as he picked up a leaf, nodding at it as if he was praising it. He fiddled with it for a while before motioning for Fu to come closer. She did so, and he smiled at her, a warm expression that made Fu's heart flutter a bit. My mother showed me this before he looked away sadly, and for some reason Fu hated to see him like that. Already moving a hand to place it on his shoulder comfortably, he perked up a little before bringing her over to a nearby tree. Leaning against it as he placed the leaf against his mouth, Fu watched and listened in amazement as he proceeded to whistle through the leaf as if it were a flute. The music he made was beautiful, sad and heart-wrenching, but beautiful. She was captivated by it, unable to tear her eyes away from him, even as he lost himself to the sadness in the song. It bore his pain, the loneliness from his life without his mother. It picked up at parts as he remembered good and all she had done for him, but the somber overtones remained. When he finally finished and set the leaf down to one side, he looked across only to see a single tear running down Fu's caramel cheek. Fu, are you okay? He wasn't allowed to finish as the mid-haired girl leaned across and captured him in a tight, uncomfortable hug, new tears coming to replace the ones she had already wept. She parted from him, leaving him a little dazed and left with the scent of her hair in his nose as she wiped the tears from her eyes and cheeks. That was beautiful. Where did you learn it? And Yukimaru suddenly seemed rather uncomfortable as he glanced between Fu and the discarded leaf on the ground. I didn't. I just sort of make it up. Fu blinked a few times, and not quite willing to believe that the music she had heard was anything but rehearsed. She looked down again at the leaf before looking back up at her, the red now tinging his features. Fu, can I ask you something? She nodded, and not quite sure why. She suddenly felt her heart rush and unconsciously leaned closer to Yukimaru. And can I see your wings? Fu blinked a few times, frozen in place as her mind did a complete 180. Yeah, I guess. She stood up and allowed her wings to unfurl, stretching a bit to relieve the discomfort that built up when she kept them suppressed for too long. They still ached a bit from all the flying she had to do across the sea. Even the rest on Naruto's back didn't do much good. Yukimaru just stared at them with wonder, making Fu feel like just a little self-conscious as she curled in on herself just a little. The young boy stood up and walked over, a gaze still fixed on the semi-transparent set of wings that branched out to either side of Fu like a dragonfly. Recently, she had been able to use the four of them, but having to take a leap up from two by skipping the third tail was difficult. It was only partial transformation, so there was none of Chomei's actual chakra involved. Just a manifestation of her own, much like a transformation jutsu, but more solid. Yukimaru traced the hand across the surface of the wing, following the light vein as it wound its way through the paper-like surface hypnotically. Fu let out a little giggle at the soft touches, surprised when she found it tickle her. Naruto never teased her for her wings. In fact, he loved them, but he had never touched them like this. And Fu found her heart beating a little faster. She wasn't sure wasn't sure what to make out of all of these strange sensations as Yukimaru continued to stroke her wings in an almost trance-like state. They're incredible. Fu blushed from the praise and not sure how to take somebody being so entranced by her wings. Thanks. Yukimaru emerged from her other side, smiling warmly. It must be incredible to be able to fly free like a bird, float on the wind like an errant petal, astray from its tree. Fu blinked at the poetic way the boy described it, finding herself lost in his bottomless magenta eyes, his warm, innocent smile captivating her, and again she found herself unconsciously drifting closer towards him. Fu almost couldn't stop herself as her lips drifted closer to his. Yukimaru only noticed what was happening right before Fu. Hey, did I hear someone play a flute over here? Fu jerked back and nearly tripping over her own feet as she tried to put distance between herself and Yukimaru before Tayu emerged from the trees. The older girl took in the scene with a trained eye, noticing the matching blushes adorning the two younger teens' faces. She also saw the way neither were meeting her in the eye, or each other for that matter. A very mischievous smirk found its way onto Tayu's lips. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you two. Fu's head shot around her. Her blushes her blushes intensity instantly doubled. It's not like that. Why don't you just go mind your own damn business? Without another word, her wings flapped powerfully, and she took off into the air, using strong strokes of her wings to propel herself further away from the embarrassing scene. Tayuya just raised an eyebrow, not quite expecting such a powerful reaction from the girl, before turning to Yukamaru, who now seemed a little lost. Don't worry, kid. She'll come around. Yukamaru blinked a few times before sharply letting his head drop to the floor. Tayuya actually found the scene a little adorable, seeing what Fu saw in the kid. Tayuya just lightly patted him on the back with a half smile, a half smirk. I was kidding, kiddo. Don't worry about it. Yukimaro looked up with a weak smile. Now, did I not hear someone play a flute, or am I going crazy from being near Naruto too long? Yukimaro's smile gained a bit of confidence as he rushed back over to where he had discarded the leaf, showing it to Tayuya, who found the makeshift instrument intriguing. Buddy musician, huh? No wonder Fu likes you. Yukimaru blushed again, but tried to gain some confidence back by playing a short melody on the leaf flute. It wasn't as long or as somber as the one he played to Fu. It contained more of a nostalgic feel. It had an equal impact on Tayuya, though. She didn't cry, but she still found the music he produced to be powerful and moving. It really came from the heart as she pulled out her spare flute from the red pouch on her belt, looking it over with scrutinizing eye before offering it to Yukimaru. The boy just looked at it attentively before taking it, staring at it like it was made of gold. Tayuya gave him a rare, heartfelt smile before walking back to camp with him. Don't worry, Yukimaru. You and I are going to get along just fine. Not much was said as the group trudged across the open field of the land of hot water, and that stretched on in a similar manner to the desert surrounding Tsuna. Occasionally, an outcropping of rock would just up from the otherwise barren landscape, breaking apart the horizon to stop traveling from going insane. Naruto wasn't sure how they were supposed to find one of Orochimaru's bases all the way out here in the middle of nowhere, but he followed Gurren anyway, and there was a slight tension among the group. Fu and Yukimaru seemed to be trying to walk as far apart from one another as physically possible. Tayuya, on the other hand, was throwing amused and knowing looks between the two, smirking every now and again from Naruto's side. He had noticed that Yukimaru now carried one of Tayuya's flutes and was a little happy that she was opening up to somebody else. He was also glad that she had a fellow musician to talk to now. Once she had tried to get him to take up an instrument, but his attention hadn't been in it. Gurren raised a hand as they came across a rather large group of three boulders that towered up above them. Her eyes narrowed in concentration as she tried to remember exactly what the entrance looked like the last time she had been there. Finally, she nodded with a small smile, turning back to the group as she pointed to the boulders. We're here. This is Orochimaru's base. End chapter 47.